Hello, this is the deep dive. We have Mitch today. These intros are going to get worse. They are going to get progressively worse the more fucking things I do. I don't know.
Demonetized, by the way. Yeah,
Yeah.
age gated.
Hey, that's fine because I'm not monetized on YouTube anyway. So all good. I can't get demonetized if you're not already monetized. Mitch, I wanted to start off with you defining the word bogan and tell me why you fit that description.
Oh, Bogan's like Darrow. Yeah. You know Darrow? Yeah.
No.
That's what Bogan is. It's like a chav, mate.
A chav. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually it's like it's someone with a very well, they're very salt of the earth people, to be fair. But they're
Yeah.
just like Australians who basically buy into all the stereotypes without even knowing that they existed. They just are walking caricatures. So we're talking like stubby shorts, thongs, you know, calls his wife Sheila, even though that's not her name. She's reminded him that like many, many times. Does it in front of their family friends just because it's very Aussie. Refuses to let any other bloke get near his barbecue,
Yeah.
or his collection of like old footballs from the state league that he used to play in his glory days when he peaked in high school at 17, 18. Yeah, that's
That
Bogan.
sounds like.
Drinking a can of VB.
Yeah.
He's
That
got
sounds
it
about
like
right.
he's got like a koozie that's got like a reference from MASH on there, some TV show from like 25 years ago or something. Hogan's Heroes, whatever it is. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that sounds exactly like 80% of the 45 to 60-year-old demographic in the UK. Apart from replace all the Australian stereotypes with British stereotypes. They can't speak.
It's just
And they
working class
slur.
Aussies, honestly. It's just
Yeah.
working class Aussies, but like ones that like, kind of have given up on public appearance, I think, and just not that kind of folk. So we've got lots of them. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, that also describes most of esports talent during off seasons. Being very honest, like, dude, not cut my hair a long time, not fucking shave.
Bro,
dude,
I go to the store in sweatpants now. I do not care. I go out in public and say, no one's gonna recognize me anyway. It's all good. I look like a caveman.
I mean, that's fine. The only time you need to look good is on stream. But even then, I'm in a dark room. You're in your gym stream, so you're too far away. Like, you're a little bit too far away.
Just far enough away.
Exactly.
Under just the right kind of lighting.
Exactly. Yeah. Everybody's like, wow, you guys look so good on camera. It's like, yeah, we have hella makeup artists that do a really good fucking job. I'll tell you that right now. And in our home setups, didn't
because we had to do it ourselves.
I was about to say, in our home setups, maybe not so much. I look like a clown, so that's fine.
I stopped wearing makeup this year. You know what?
Really? Did you?
On I wish they broadcast. No one fucking noticed. All right.
No, yeah.
No
the
one
lights
noticed.
aren't too harsh.
Yep. Nah, didn't do it. Not for one show this year. Unless it was grand final. So there you go.
I kind of wish I did that now because I'm thinking about it.
They dead ass. We're not paying for makeup people anymore. So I said, okay, well, that's fine. You are not paying for makeup. You're not gonna get makeup. How about that? How about that one?
The lights aren't even too harsh. The ones we have. So it's not like you're gonna see every pimple and shit like that.
I have like 4 on me because I'm in like kind of a dank garage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like a ring of lights around me, but yeah.
I do remember at the start of the year having to set up all that stuff again because when I lived in Glendale next to Matt, we had the massive giant green screen with the metal poles. Basically, it's like a giant bed sheet if you imagine that, and then there's a light bar that went behind you, and I tried my hardest to get that set up. And now I've just got 2 Elgato key lights and the green screen that pulls up, and I'm like,
yep. And no one can tell the difference.
You can't tell the difference. You can't tell the difference because we're stuck in a fucking little box like we are now. Got a goddamn box online. Fucking sucks. Yeah. So I'm going to start with the very top with you, Mitch, or I guess I wouldn't say the very top, maybe the very bottom. Depends how you want to phrase it, I suppose.
I started at the top and now I'm here. Yeah. So
yeah, exactly. We're about to go all the way downhill now. We're going to go right back to when you originally played. And I was surprised when you told me this originally. I'm not sure when you did. Probably when we first met, but you used to play COD 4 Pro Mod back in the day, and so did I, but not to a good at all. I wasn't a good player in the slightest. I just fucking around on pub servers. I was curious because Australia, and this is a conversation I have with Scott too, the esports scene is a lot less connected compared to the UK with Europe and America just being kind of America. How did you start out in COD 4 on the Pro Mod and then kind of transition from there? What was going down?
It might be the most organic story because I was a gamer as a kid. Sure, I was games and books. That was me. I was really not social and a bit nerdy. And I'll be honest with you, I definitely got assessed for autism a few times. True though.
Yeah,
I'm just kind of a psycho. But
yeah.
I played Unreal Tournament 99 back when I was 10 or so. basically it was like on dial up in the countryside. So like I was playing for like 120 ping even to like Australian servers and
Oof.
but I didn't know any different, right? So that was fine. And I just like fucked around. I had some friends. We had a clan, you know what I mean? We
Oh
didn't do
hell yeah!
anything.
What was the
We just
clan's name?
changed our name. I actually don't know. We just had to put an at
Oh,
symbol on either end of our name. So I don't know what that meant. I'm not sure. I
okay.
don't remember. I don't even know what I was called back then. Probably Uber Baseman. That's like where my nickname came from.
Okay.
But I actually discovered COD 4 through like a church youth group. Like they had like a LAN night or whatever. I'm like, what was this
Wait.
game? Yeah,
What?
dead ass. Yeah. I was like into like church and youth group a fair bit during like my early to late teens, I think.
Right.
But so yeah, like these guys are like playing Call of Duty 4 at this like youth group LAN party, and they're all like handing around the cracked version of the COD 4,
Oh yeah, I
I
play.
think that's
Yeah.
it. So I play. I was like, I got ruined, but I was like, oh, this is actually super good. So when I went back home, I played, and there were like servers that you could play the cracked versions of COD 4 on.
Yep.
And it was just like public servers, right? So that's like kind of like a lost thing now, is like having hosted servers as like hubs for people to return to. So I would play a lot of these public servers, and it was hardcore. So basically, hardcore COD 4 was like you would just die way really fast. Like you just die way quicker. And like there was like a lot of the broken stuff in those modes. But I would run into like the same people a fair bit. And I ran into one guy who like randomly, we used Xfire back then. You remember Xfire?
I remember X-Fire. Yep.
So
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's like a networking app for games. You can see what, like, it's like Steam, right? You could see what friends of yours are in games. You can invite them to games and you
Yep.
could chat with them. I got randomly added like by one of the guys that I ran up against in pubs a bunch of times, and he started off like ruining me, and like every day I play like 4 or 5 hours in these same servers and he'd always be there. Um uh and he invited me randomly to a voice call. He just got bored one day, I guess. And it was like, like we're all like the same age, it turns out. And it turns out he was also from Adelaide.
Oh.
Um,
Okay.
so just randomly, like, because we were on Aussie servers, right? But you can kind of tell where people are from based on their ping in game, because you know what Adelaide is because we're like 80 ping, and you know what Brisbane and Sydney are because they're like 40 to 60. So you can basically tell where people are from, because only people in the coastal hubs are really playing whatever. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, and we started playing competitively together in this little team, and then I got indoctrinated into, like, at the time we had like competitive ladder leaderboards on a website called Cybergamer, and there'd be like weekly. There was like multiple divisions, like open division, amateur division, intermediate division, and invite division. And there'd be all different leagues, and you can work your way up them. And yeah, we started played an open and made our way to amateur for a while, and I started networking a lot with just on people. I found the forums. The forums were an absolute shit show. Like you just would never want to. Absolute cesspool, but there'd be a lot of back and forth there, and that was like where the Australian Call of Duty community was centered on these cyber game forums. So as time went on, like I ended up becoming forum moderator. I was just very very involved. I'd play a lot. I scrimmed. I moved up into sort of better and better teams as time went on. I networked with players that were just better, and I eventually ended up in like an invite level team. I was like the worst player on that team by a long shot, but I was a
Okay.
very good caller.
Yep.
So like what I offer, I was an AK player. So like I was a rifle player. I was very good at holding angles, but I was not mechanically that good, because I only started playing COD 4 at like age 16. A lot of these guys have been like, mechanical gods, like playing to age 12 or whatever. And we gave them the AK-74U and had them just run, you know what I mean? Or,
Yeah.
or gave them the snipper, gave them the scope and let them run wild. And COD 4 was so solved by that point, because we had a
Yes.
map pool that hadn't changed. We were playing pro
Yep.
mod, right? So that was a
Same
mod that
rules.
basically, yep, same rules. You couldn't have any loadout. It was either you'd have assault, which is AK, you'd have SMG, what is it, rush? I don't know what we called it. The
Yeah.
SMG
SMG and
base
then scope.
rollout, where they
Yeah.
had they had a flash, they had like the SMG and then the scope, right? So, and you could only have one scope, two SMGs on each team, and the rest would be probably AK players, but you could play other rifles, but you just didn't. And we had that nailed down. We knew what FPS we should limit our game to strafe jump far enough to get from one end of the map to the other quickly. 250 FPS would like allow you for the longest strafes, but 333 FPS would give you higher strafes. Like all this, all the concrete barriers in the game you could actually bounce off if you strafe jumped onto them and stuff.
Yep.
And like we had
I
all the,
remember
like, it was like
those.
surfing, right? So basically. Um, so
Because it
yeah,
was built on the Quake engine. The COD
exactly.
4.
Honestly, oh, it's awesome. I went back and played it, and it felt really clunky because after playing Overwatch, where you just jump around like an idiot. But,
Yeah.
so yeah, yeah, that's where I played. I played most of my time in intermediate division. I think I was more suited for that. But I got into an invite team probably because of networking I'd done, and I'd also been a caster at the time. So like I was pretty well known, and and I was known as a very good caller. That was something I was good at, reading other teams. So
Okay.
um, that's why, despite my mechanical weaknesses, I got onto some good teams. One of them being um, so I ended up working with a team called Mind Freak, who are
Oh yeah.
still a known name. Back then, It was started by a bunch of guys who played COD on PS2. And so I ended up working for that org and being like sort of one of the guys who ran it with my mate Reagan, who started Mindfreak. And yeah, that's been passed over now to a guy. A guy in Australia bought the Mindfreak brand and is operating it after he operated the brand I started. So it's like, yeah, I
Oh,
had a handle
interesting.
of the big Australian esports, Legacy Esports, who actually attended
Oh,
Worlds
Legacy.
or
Yeah.
MSI, I think. Legacy is I literally formed that team with a bunch of players who came back to me after I managed them on Mindfreak, who just wanted to work with me, and
What
I
game was that?
designed that
Was that COD again?
League of Legends,
Oh, League again. Okay,
actually.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, that stupid tree on a shield. Yeah,
Yep, yep, yep,
we
yep.
designed that. Yeah, that was I would say I'm one of the founding members of that org. So spent a lot of time in the Australian esports scene at grassroots level. Yeah, from like 2009 onward.
You said you're doing a little bit of casting too, I suppose, with COD. Well, I'm assuming
Yeah,
that was like LANs and whatnot, or was that like kind of online, just kind of
it was
fucking
like
around on
online
scrims and stuff?
because I was starting to I had to play less because I was going to uni
Yeah.
and I couldn't keep up the 30 hours a week, literally 30 hours a week scrimming, like for no for apropos of nothing, for no prizes
No
really.
money.
Like
Yeah.
people do that now on salaries, but we just obviously loved it. Like I'd get back from work or wherever, and I'd just 8 hours, I'd start to finish just playing. So um, I had to scale that back a lot, but I wanted to stay involved. And a friend of mine, also from Adelaide, was part of a company like an all called Net Game Radio, where they did radio broadcasts for these
All right.
CGI, these invite level matches each week. So I said, oh yeah, bugger it. I mean, I might as well just transition over to this because I can still be involved and still talk smack on the forums and still have some relevance and still be part of everything without having to scrim 30 hours a week. So that's where the casting really started happening. And that's as I started to scale back my involvement as a player and start casting these and they were just you're using WINAMP. There was like I
Yeah.
don't know,
Yeah.
every caster's told this story, but there was like a plugin for WINAMP called Shoutcast where you could obviously like broadcast your voice to an IP that people could find on a website, click on, it opens up a player, they can hear it. So I ran the Call of Duty division eventually at Net Game Radio, just like getting the game, sorting the casters, and then casting a lot of the games. And I did a couple lands as well. It was competitive. There was another company that did the same thing called GameStar, and we fucking hated it. We hated each other, man. It was crazy, the animosity. Some of those GameStar guys are still casting like Australian
Oh,
esports stuff now.
really? What games are they doing
Yeah.
now? They must be doing what, League, I suppose? League
Yeah,
and
I guess like League
CS?
and like they tried to make. I don't think GameStar exists now, but those guys like are still doing it like low level CS stuff, I'd
Sure.
assume, and that sort of stuff. But yeah, so I did that. I started when video streaming became an option. I started Mindfreak TV. So I was at Mindfreak at the time. We started like I started casting the games there. I had to use a guy who had good internet. He would be the observer and actually stream it, and it would just be my voice in TeamSpeak because I was in Adelaide. I couldn't actually upload. I couldn't do a stream. It was not
Yeah.
possible. So yeah, a bloke called Shieldy, his name was, and he was like my guy, my cameraman. He'd like stream the games. He'd do the observing, and it was like one of the first. Like at that time, people didn't have observers. We did it all ourselves, but because of that way that setup had to be, it might have been one of the first, especially in Australia, the first like observer caster pair sort of setup. So he was good value, that guy, and
Kind
yeah.
of
So I
wild.
hung around in Australia for a bit doing that while I went to uni.
Yeah. I mean, is Shieldy still in the game? Like, is
He's about. I saw him at IEM Sydney when I in
oh,
like
no shot.
2014. Homie came up and said hello. So yeah, shout outs to him if he finds this. Good bloke. Good bloke.
Nice. That's interesting because yeah, like you said, you obviously most people at that point were doing their own broadcasting and their own observing and casting and production, like literally everything.
Yeah.
It's a tale as old as time, especially when you look back over the last 5 years or so. Like going 5 years back, especially when there weren't that many big production companies. I mean, in the UK, we had like
No.
ESL and stuff, but you were really just doing your
You guys
own
had an all. This is before
spoof.
ESL even did anything. So this
Yeah,
was like
sure.
Chaos TV. Chaos TV was the
Mm-hmm.
company, and Quad V. So that was
Oh, yeah.
like your D-Man, your Red Eye. They were Quad V, Chaos TV, and stuff like that. And then in America, like Scoots and Baker were doing their sort of live on three. Oh no, it was like they were doing the esports sort of production stuff there as
Yeah.
well. And that maybe even a little bit earlier on there, but so they were doing a lot of the QuakeCon stuff, a lot of the CS stuff, the Call of Duty 4 stuff as well, if I'm not mistaken. So Australia was like way behind. We didn't have anything standalone that did that. It was literally Netgame Radio and GameStar until ESL developed a presence in Australia. Um, there were two ESLs in Australia. The one we know now,
Right.
which is started by a guy called Nick Vanzetti. Before that, the ESL Australia was headed up by yours truly. we had the license to be ESL in Australia, but we were a little bit in over our heads, I think, trying to run
Right.
events. That was
Was
like my
there
world
too
of that was
little of
my
you?
world of tanks era. But yeah,
Oh
we
yeah. Okay.
couldn't quite get it done because it was not a full-time job. We were doing it on the side.
Sure.
Whereas the current ESL over there, the guys that ran that were running something called ACL, like the Australian Console League, and they were actually really going for it, and they put a lot more time and gave up a lot more to make it happen. So they eventually ended up becoming ESL Australia.
I mean, it's quite a costly endeavor as well, like taking on a big contract like that and then not having, I guess, the experience too. It comes with not only experience, but you also need a lot of people to kind of make those kind of things run, especially for a
And
whole
we did
region
well.
too.
We made an event happen. We did a World of Tanks event at like a convention, like built from scratch, but
Sure.
making money from it
Oh,
was a
impossible.
whole different story.
Yeah.
Like I think Reagan ended up losing a lot of money, ended up being in the hole pretty badly on running that entire event because we just didn't know how to budget properly and line produce a show. We had no experience in doing that. So we got the production, we got the stage put together. I had to put it together myself because we didn't have people to do it. Like, you know, these huge blocks and had to put carpet on and all that sort of stuff. And but we yeah, no idea what we were doing really. So it cost us a lot of money. We didn't stay ESL Australia. They didn't probably want to keep us as there because they probably realized, hang on, these guys
Yeah.
are not actually the experience level we need. To be fair, we were probably the second most experienced crew for esports productions in Australia. Not that saying much, but yeah, the other guys ended up getting the license and they did a great job. So we hated them too at the time, but it was just rivalries
I mean,
everywhere.
it's
You know
just
what I
small
mean?
rivalry, right? Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
we had that a little bit of that in the UK, at least with ESL and like, I wouldn't say it's that much of a rivalry, but Belong, they shared like a League of Legends contract for
Mm.
challenges and for the pre-challenges. I forget what it's called now, but yeah, so
Did we
they
ever
would do
meet at
half and
that
half.
Insomnia Land I did? Did we ever
Which
get to meet
one?
them? I did like an I-49, maybe
Nope,
I-50. Okay, right. Because
nope.
I met like Medic and like Kieran and all those guys because I
Yeah,
did like the League of Legends fan fest over
that
there. But I don't know
was
if I met you. Yeah.
just before me. I
Okay.
was I 57, 58, I think. I
Okay. Yeah.
57.
That's the only time I've
57,
actually
58,
yeah.
58, 59. Yeah.
That's this one of two times I've been to the UK for anything, and
Yeah.
Riot flew me out to run their like League of Legends fan fest as it was. So
Oh
it's
yeah,
like
the
close
Fan
to there.
Fest. Yeah. No, that would have been well, Aaron at that time was called Sona, but had to change his name to Medic because you know Sona being a fucking character in the game, he can't
He
have that
was.
anymore.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Sona.
So
Yeah.
mm,
And then when he left, which is when I did Challenger Series in 2016, that was like here's your trial run for Riot Games, and he obviously did that with me and Excoundrel, and then he fucked off, and I replaced him, and that's when I started to do Insomnia. So
gotcha,
yeah, so
gotcha.
we
Okay.
we didn't meet, but close to, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, back obviously that was quite a while ago at this point. Was there anybody in Australia that you this could be traditional sports as well, to be fair, or like esports? Was there anybody you
Mm.
look to and go, okay, I want to be like that person, I want to follow what they're doing, or is it more kind of like you finding your own path?
Well, at that time, Pastry Time and Papa Smithy were casting League in Australia. Guess what? Hated them too. We all just hated each other. You know what I mean? But like so, because I eventually transitioned over to just doing League of Legends. I think I started casting Call of Duty 4 well before those two started doing League.
Yeah.
But they were doing League. They got in a great spot. They were doing a lot of the Chinese League of Legends, like the English language Chinese League of Legends casts as well. And I just didn't really have any respect for like the rules or anything like that. So I came in, I undercut the shit out of them. The only time I've ever done this as well, I undercut the shit out of them to do a Chinese League of
Okay.
Legends tournament, and I thought I did fine, but like my co-caster was not in great shape for that, and like Pastry and Papa were like, "Bro, that you can't. That's dirty." You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And I was like,
Here are
"Yeah,
the
whatever,
fucking
guys."
rules,
You know,
baby.
and then later on, like you know, as time goes on, Riot sets up in Australia, and then they grab. They bring Papa and Pastry in, and you know there's no way your boy's getting a look in there because of
No,
what
no way.
happened with them, and that was happening.
Yeah.
I was just on the outer, um, which is fine. I get it. Probably would have done the same thing. We buried the hatchet. You know, I'm really good mates with Papa Smithy now. Like we get chatting at a party out here in LA, and you know we go all hours of the night. He's great guy.
Yeah, he
You
is.
know, considering I like definitely tried to fuck with them on purpose, not caring about the consequences. You know, he's been it's just a great source of insight and advice at times as well. Julie and I interact with much less. We actually have some similar interests. I think we both love Magic the Gathering, but we just haven't had the chance to sort of hang out very much. But you know, those guys, yeah, they were very graceful about what happened there, and it ended up hurting me. So that's a good story about how undercutting is like not the way to go, I
Hey,
guess.
it still happens. So, you know, I mean,
Yeah, I learned my
that,
lesson, and I'm here to share the wisdom
oh
with
yeah.
y'all. It's a bad idea.
It's funny because way back then too, there was like way less commentators as well. So you kind of stepping in and undercutting like that, in the very short term, there's almost no like there's no like negative impact for you, but over the mid to long term, it's like okay, kind of fucky, like you're
Like,
gonna get
oh,
rolled,
what's
like
that? Is that the consequences of my actions coming back to
yeah,
bite me? Damn, that blows. Yeah, I think if that had not happened, I think they would have been quite happy to bring me into the fold, and I would have
sure,
casted League of Legends. And not that that has gone anywhere, as you know, in Australia now, Riot have actually pulled out and aren't running a circuit there anymore. But obviously, both of those guys went on to cast League, internationally.
yeah,
There's a chance. I almost ended up casting with Papa Smithy. I
oh,
was asked to come and be uh, Monty's replacement and cast with Papa Smithy when Monty left to go to the Overwatch League. And LCK were like, "Do you want to come and live here and work with Papa?" And now at the same time, I was fielding offers from the LEC,
yeah.
at the time the EU LCS and the Overwatch League. So I ended up declining both league offers and ended up really committing to Overwatch. But that's obviously a bit further down the track, yeah. But so I almost ended up working with him, and I casted with him before. It was really good. Obviously, he's excellent at what he does. So yeah, a lot of love to those guys.
And this okay, this quickly hop, skip, and jump to that then, because
Hmm.
you ended up like you just said, turning down LEC, LCK. Was there any specific reason why Overwatch was a first priority for you? Because off the top of my head, it's like, well, it's a brand new game. Like, there's a lot of like money obviously being invested. Was that like a primary reason why you went with the Overwatch League, or did you kind of fall out of love with League of Legends, or what was the thought process behind that?
At that point, I was definitely courting both of the ideas pretty equally. I'd at that point, I'd had some really favorable discussions with Riot and guys like Quickshot and stuff who really wanted to bring me on because I'd casted League of Legends at IEM Katowice.
Yeah,
Um, and that had me casting with like Monty and Doa, Crepo, Deficio, D-Man, a lot of the current sort of names. There was just as Joe, I think, had stepped back. But I was in a good spot, I think, to go and do that. But I'd also been working on Overwatch as a passion project at DSL, and just on the side, working with Jason Kaplan on like our little, Pepega little podcast, and also casting a lot of like the European small tournaments that happened. So, um, that was just after I'd done an Overwatch World Cup, and Nate Nanzer had sold me on the same snake oil that he sold everyone else on. But it was I favored the idea of getting in, having the opportunity to get in at the ground floor on something, as opposed to like joining the rat race and in sort of the league circuit and having to climb the wall of dicks with my ass cheeks like every lol caster has had to do. And I was just like, man, I feel like this makes much more sense to establish myself as like a main caster for Overwatch, as opposed to like working a peripheral region, which is what Korea was at the time. Sadly, even though they were still winning everything, that was during the
yeah,
SKT era.
it's true. Yeah,
Um, and then deciding, like, and did I want to live in Korea? Like, because I was in Germany at the time. I'd just done 4 years of living in a foreign country with a language I didn't speak. And I was like, man, am I really going to do this again? Like, I'm going to go to Korea and have to start from scratch there, like trying to figure it out because I didn't I didn't thrive under this circumstances in Germany. I think like I really wish I wasn't as lazy and indecisive and maybe just anxious and that young at that sort of younger age. Because if I'd really given it my all in Germany and actually taken classes to learn the language properly and really throw myself into things there, I might never have left. Even still, I thought the place was fantastic. I loved it a lot. It has a special place in my heart. But not being able to speak the language and not really doing enough to fix that issue and relying on people like my girlfriend over there at the time for all
yeah,
things German, um, less than ideal. So I thought that America, I also knew that like that was really where a lot of the big esports events were happening, whether it was for League or for Overwatch. So uh, I think it was a bit of a no-brainer at the end of the day to get over there and start that, especially because I worked my dick off in Overwatch as well,
sure.
just for nothing.
Yeah,
Because ESL weren't paying me to do Overwatch content or cast Overwatch stuff. That was off my own dime. I was able to use their studios, which was really handy. But yeah, no, it had to be America and the Overwatch League, I think.
yeah. It feels like with every caster, they've gone through the same thought process as you when a new game has come out. It's like, well, there's already an established scene, an established hierarchy, a totem pole, or whatever you want to call it, in this game that I'm currently pursuing, or there's this new game that kind of, Nate Nan's a little bit of snake oil salesman there, but at the end of the day, it's still a brand new title that hasn't really got established commentators just yet. It's you're hedging your bets one way or the other. I know that's how I felt on a smaller scale when I did League of Legends. I was like, well, when am I going to next get brought up to LEC? And I kind of went through the same process of like, yeah, that's never going to happen. And I look at the people that do it now, I wouldn't be there. So it's much more of a easier route, I think, if you want to go all the way up. I would, well, not all the way up, but you know what I mean.
I'd done it. Like I brute force, like I climbed through Counter-Strike and through League of Legends, right? But I will admit that was a lot because I was also given opportunities to cast those games when I was at ESL. So like if I wasn't given these opportunities to do like lower tier events and had to find them myself, then like who knows whether I would have been able to climb to that degree, you know?
Yeah.
That's the dilemma that many casters now face, where they're not in like a situation where they're just going to be served up opportunities to do this. They have to find it themselves. So
yeah, those opportunities, they're getting slimmer, I feel, especially with how established titles are coming out of the gate, like Valorant, for example, is like the newest one.
Yeah, it's because like every game developer now doesn't think they want to do esports. Like back then it was like seemed like the thing to do, and like companies like ESL were literally built off the idea that any game developer could come to them and they could spin up an esports league for them, just add water, which they did do, in fairness. But now a lot of game devs are like, well, maybe we don't really care about it being esports, and maybe we'd rather let that happen organically. Maybe we'd rather take time and start to build up a team that can do it ourselves or whatever. So, the idea of like the third party tournament operator and stuff is very different now, because esports is not nearly as sexy as like a investment prospect as it was.
Sure. Do you think that's a lot to do with the way the current economy and like climate is going, just globally right now, since it is a market downturn and VCs are investing probably less money than they've ever done in esports, and we're not really in a bull market anymore?
Yeah, but also there's a reason for like it. There's also other reasons that it looks unsexy. Like you can't monetize the viewer in esports, not in a way that shows that your broadcast is making money. Motherfuckers, like trimming my hedges, god damn it. The problem I think with so you can't make money off broadcast rights. We know there's sort of a monopoly / duopoly in streaming esports that is very, I'd say, borderline impossible to break at this point. And it's not pay-per-view, right? So there's like, you cannot monetize someone's viewing of esports. You can monetize their involvement in the game, but you need fairly sophisticated tools to track whether esports sort of encourages higher spending in a game. Now, I think it does, but you have to prove that to justify the spending of money on esports. So when you get these things like, I don't know, let's say the Overwatch League is a good example. It's like a black box, or it was intended to be a black box. Like there'd be this big investment coming in from the teams, and the league would ideally be able to operate at a profit, and that profit would be shared amongst the teams, and it would be sufficient to justify their investment initially, or at least to offset their like franchise payments. But you can't monetize the esports viewer. You can monetize the person that buys a ticket and buys an overpriced hot dog at the esports arena Arlington, but that's it. So I think people are starting to realize that now, and realize, well, hang on, what are actually the vehicles for generating revenue in esports? That's why people are moving in the direction of influencer and content creators, because it's much more discernible how they can drive the popularity, and putting a game in the cultural zeitgeist, I think, is much more important to anyone right now than having a robust esports program.
I live right next to a main road, and the amount of loud cars and ambulances and fire engines that go down it is ridiculous. So I'm sorry if anybody can hear the revving of like
LA vibes.
Yeah, dude, some race car running down the road. Could be a Lambo for all I know, to be fair. Speaking of which, though, content creators and casting, they're almost going hand in hand, it feels like. At least over the last year and a half, personally, from what I've seen. I feel casters are almost having to become like partial content creators to at least a small degree, to get out there a little bit more, whether it's on social media, YouTube, whatever, like Twitch stream, like you can be a streamer and be a commentator, like a fairly large one. Do you think Like, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think that's a bad thing? Do you think it's something that kind of needed to happen?
Well, the, so the problem is that like a good content creator does not necessarily a good caster make. Which I think is like kind of the problem is that being a good content creator makes you very, very good at like making yourself more than just a blip on the radar and like having good presence and generating a lot of goodwill and support. But it doesn't actually necessarily mean that you have, in my opinion, this might be old fashioned nowadays, that you have the skill set that that you know great casting really requires. I think there's like a lot of there's a lot of overlap now, and I think the things like co-streaming and stuff also assist that. Um, you don't have to do it, but if you're not going to do it and you're not going to be like a viral public figure, then you have to be extremely good caster. Like you
Yeah.
have to be extremely talented. Uh, I think that like when I look at how people regard commentators and broadcast talent, I would say that when they talk about what casters they like, so much of it comes down to like, do they like the person as like a content creator figure? Like, do they like the brand? Do they like the vibe? Are they funny? Are they entertaining? There are only a very small number of casters that can be agnostic to how popular they are as a person and as a brand, and still be a and still be sort of a good caster and move up. It gets harder and harder, I think. So I think that to compete nowadays, yeah, you have to alongside your casting, you need to create content, which is just like not the same because creating content doesn't make you a better caster. I don't think. Like I just wish the casters were able to focus on that, but this is not how it works. When virtually, and not exactly, but virtually, the casters are chosen by the people that watch. And the reason for that is that the people that hire casters don't fucking know what makes a good caster. So they just listen to the public. Sometimes the public's right. Like I think if the public like really dislikes a caster, there's probably like a good reason for that, right?
Sure.
But I would say it's not as true in the other direction. And a lot of like people that like a lot of people either lack the ability to evaluate casting talent or don't really care as long as people seem to like them. They just want to put people on the broadcast that people like. And that's something that a lot of casters now need to know because if you don't do that, now you can do it the other way. You can be really good and people can like you because of that. I think that's me.
Sure.
I think that I don't think that I've generated like a enough of a brand for that to have carried me at all. In fact, sometimes it's really not related. But I was able to be consistently good enough to become liked for that reason, but not really for any other, to be honest. Whereas I would say that there are casters that are to me, objectively weaker in terms of their ability to cast that many would put on similar or even better footing than me when evaluating them as casters because they like them or because they are funnier or because like their social media presence is more sort of compelling or their content is funnier or and more entertaining. So that's like something casters need to understand is that you might be great at what you do, but what's really important as a caster is whether people think you are great because that's who these fucking people that pay casters really listen to. So you better figure out a way for people to like you a lot. Doesn't and like no, it's not that being if people like you and you're bad, then you'll just be a meme. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's definitely you need to be decent, but yeah, that's the secret sauce. The casters need to know that going into the job nowadays. I think.
Would you say that differs from traditional sports? It feels like a lot of people in traditional sports, unless you're looking at like the NBA desk or anything with like Shaq, etc. But he's also a funny motherfucker. Like that even I like that
Oh,
kind of
Charles Barkley as
atmosphere. And
well.
yeah,
Yeah.
like they're so fucking funny. And
So people don't watch that show because the analysis is spot on.
exactly,
They watch that show
exactly.
because the banter is funny. The
But
banter is maybe the host gets away with it by being,
sure,
but yeah.
with commentary though in traditional sports, it feels like not I wouldn't say the opposite, but it feels like people care less about the commentary in traditional sports than people do in esports. Would you say that's an
Yeah,
accurate statement?
yeah, because esports is populated by like a just a horde of people that really just want to connect and feel connected. That's that is actually epitomizes the tail end of the millennial and then the Gen Z generation. Is that like most of these people are confronted by fakeness everywhere. I mean, millennials, we dealt with that problem with like social media for the longest time, and Gen Z is even wiser to it. Gen Z, I mean, I'm using very broad strokes for generational divides, but people, most esports viewers now, they crave authenticity from the people that are talking to them.
Yeah.
Uh, and the polish is a distant second place. Why do you think someone like XQC is such an effective streamer? Such a like the guy, I would say, like if I listen to SQC speak about life and share his sort of wisdom, I don't know if I'd find in any of that like grounded in reality or like necessarily cogent or even intelligible at times. But it doesn't really matter because people sort of love him because he's very genuine. There's not a lot of like filters there. He's like, you take one look around his room and it's like full of just trash, and people identify with this like,
Yeah.
very no holds barred commitment to being oneself. Um, so where, and if this was what people wanted in traditional sports, then I don't think that the comment people would just mute everything, right? And that's why people listen to um, the Manning brothers do their co-stream, because they are swearing, they're joking around, they're sharing anecdotes from the days. There's no, that polish is just, in fact, that polish can be, it's not even a distant second to authenticity. Sometimes it's a fucking detriment to how people engage with the product. So you have to, like, you cannot do things. That's why, like, it's not a valid comparison, esports to traditional sports when it comes to casting. I adopt many of the skill sets because I think they're quite effective in terms of like casting, but a good caster is much more than just really good technique. It's much more than I would like. It's much less about technique than I personally would like it to, but that's self-serving because that's the area in which I'm particularly strong. It's the other areas, when we talk about like social media presence, content, like, how compelling is the content? That's where I really struggle, and that's what really holds me back. So, and that's just me saying I wish it didn't, but I think that's I at this point I'm committed. I have to be
Committed to the bit.
so much better as a caster than these extremely popular folk to get by, and I'm priced into that approach now at this point in my career.
Is that some advice you'd give to up and coming commentators then? Is that I would focus not entirely your soul onto becoming a technically proficient and well-rounded commentator, but split that time with content creation and just being a personality on top of it?
Yeah, yeah. Don't do it like I did. My approach was valid back then, barely. I got lucky in a lot of ways as well, but yes, I think that like you need people to advocate for you. So first of all, people need to know who the fuck you are. Second of all, these people need to want to listen to you speak. And there's like lots of ways where that you can do that. But this is why I think like um the way that desks work in esports, analyst desks and stuff like that, that's like a great place to start because you are not priced into the restrictions of having to call the game accurately. You don't even have to say anything that makes sense on the desk. Just be entertaining and funny. Like, okay, maybe try and help your host out by doing your job and addressing the game at hand. But that's a great environment to actually build your brand because you're not restricted. You don't actually have to like do the casting of the game. You have to be on top of that so much. It's a good example, I think, why Bren and Josh what helped a part of what helped them become quite successful is actually the time they spent on the desk and not casting initially. Then they were able to build that brand, that rapport. Like everyone wants to, quote the World Cup desk, right? As like a great example
Yeah.
of a desk. And go back and watch it, and you see that pinpoint accuracy and analysis was not at a premium. Was not exactly in full supply. Johnny definitely helped with that, and there were times. But the focus of that desk was the chemistry and the banter, and they tried to make it like inside the NBA. And there's a reason why people ask for that. Like many have tried, Jack, to approach Overwatch in a purely this works for other games, but Overwatch especially in a purely analytical way. Monty Christopher is a great example of someone who really wanted to like get the people to respect stats and strategy and minutia and all that sort of stuff. And the people spoke. They said, "We don't care." They spoke by not watching the videos. They spoke by not, like gravitating towards that style of casting. They made it very clear that that wasn't what they wanted. And God bless Monty. His approach was to decry that fact and say, I can't believe that people don't want this, as opposed to changing his approach. And maybe that's he was like me, and that he's already priced into being that way, right? But there've been many like milestones where we've been able to get a really clear idea of what people actually want in Overwatch, but in esports in general. So you only need to look to them as examples of how best to set yourself up if you want to become a caster.
It does feel like, especially with Overwatch, while the game is like incredibly complicated at the highest level, it's like fairly simple to watch what happens on screen. Unlike, I would say, League of Legends, where it is again extremely complicated for different reasons. And although it can be quite difficult to watch too, where there are so many abilities going on. You could say the same for Overwatch, but you know when a kill comes through, big like ult, big grab, like the way Overwatch is set out versus League of Legends, there's not constantly 10 people on the screen. There's like small fights happening literally everywhere. So it's
we're
more
dealing with
conducive to, like, I'd say more casual viewing in a sense than it is. That's why World Cup's so popular, to like the hardcore viewer base.
Yeah, because we're dealing with base stats in Overwatch, and only ever base stats, maybe with buffs from like things like Nano Boost and Sound Barrier. But in League of Legends, you're dealing with
Items and rune,
items,
well, not runes
items
anymore,
with
but
different sort of like buffs to certain sort of attributes,
yeah.
bound abilities on these items, summoner spell choices, but also the way that you scale based on your performance in game, individually and also as a team. And then there's the secondary and tertiary objectives that you fight around. So that makes that much more hardcore. Whereas in Overwatch, like it's a little bit more straightforward. There's not a lot of like, hey, this happened 5 minutes ago, so now this looks way different than it would have otherwise. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's something that I think, from my perspective at least, a lot of casters that are doing tier 2, tier 3, especially the color casters, they want to be the smartest egg in the room. They want to be the smartest motherfucker. And it's very difficult to tell any of them apart because they all sound the same. And
Yeah,
telling yourself
and like
apart is very important, like especially in color commentary.
yeah, but it's also really easy to do, because it turns out being yourself is like a great way to set yourself apart, because no one is really the same as you. So
Yeah.
you it's actually not that hard, unless unfortunately you yourself is just boring as fuck, and in which that case I recommend go on a Kentucky tour, do some fucking mushrooms, look at some Arizona cave paintings, something, you know what I mean? Like you can,
Life
but
experience.
also like fans don't want to watch someone who's trying to make themselves look smart at all possible times. You know,
For sure.
there are members of tier 2, and you know, I would say, you know, in general in Overwatch, that care too much about being right. They care too much about being smart. Care too much about making a correct prediction, and it is to their detriment. It might be the least important thing for a caster to focus on, but for some people, it's a matter of ego or having the wrong take on how best to go forward as a commentator. So
Let's kind of continue that thread then with talking about like tier 2. And we've seen it in Valorant recently, or like there's been a little drama. Well, this is actually a few months ago, but I kind of wanted to bring this up with you because you've had some rather historic tweets about casters over, I'd say, the last like 5-6 months as the Valorant scene has been developing. Obviously, Overwatch has kind of been in this weird state, at least with tier 2, so it's not really happened there, but it's also happened in League of Legends. It's happened in every single fucking industry. Or not industry, sorry, every single game. With commentators and trying to, what you did originally, and you got bit in the ass for it, which is undercutting and just starting this race to the bottom. And it's something that continues to happen, I think, to this day. I think Monty, over the last few days as well, has also been tweeting about that kind of stuff. And I guess it's, as a tier 2 commentator, it's very hard to, I think, discern what that means and if you are doing it correctly, if you're doing, like, you're going about it the wrong way, because you need that job because of the amount of commentators that are around now. Unlike when myself and you kind of started casting, you obviously before me, there wasn't that many people at all. But now, that race to the bottom, it's only one domino that needs to fall over before everything else falls.
yeah, I think you're right in saying that it's very different than it was for us. And I think like a lot of like my outbursts have been like my complete shock sometimes in what I've encountered. I'm definitely becoming less and less shocked now as I see it happening more frequently. I think there are more examples of like ways to become casters than ever, but there's like a lot more competition in trying to sort of become one. And like we've seen casters like try so many different ways to get in. One caster who I won't name, they the way they got into casting a certain game is when the game started releasing footage of like pre-beta or like what the gameplay looked like. This caster would take that footage, cast over it, and then upload it underneath that tweet in some way to try and get attention. Be like, look at me, hey, because that's the only way that they could really cast the game right, which is
Yeah.
interesting. I was just like, this guy's just really annoying. But I got like whatever sort of works. They did end up casting for a time, but they did not make it. They did not make it. Um, and that was because, well, there were reasons for that as well. I'm sure that they'd have a different opinion on it to me, but there was a lot of like, undercutting going on. And I think this person got on the wrong side of that and wasn't able to sort of, um, sort of make it work for them. I'm trying to be a little bit democratic about this because I don't know the full story, but um, I would say that most people that undercut don't realize they're doing it, um, because it's easy to see like casters out there doing their thing, but it's really hard to find out information about like how much they should get paid. Like when I quote what I think a caster should be paid, I'm being pretty generous because I'm literally quoting a figure from 2012, like a standard day rate that's been set since like around that time. Now, normally, especially when accounting for things like inflation, but also an industry that's growing and developing with higher expectations of casters, you'd think that that rate would increase. I found the opposite to be the case in many ways. um, and like I clashed a lot with some like tournament organizers in the early days of Valorant because I found out what they were paying people, and I was like, you can't do this. They were not only paying them very, very little, but also like creating things like caster competitions, like come and cast our games, and like if you're voted the
Yeah.
most popular caster by the audience, you will get to work on like the next tier up kind of thing. And I sat there like, what? hang about. I'm sure this is great for people that like already have jobs and stuff, and like they're just like you wanting to give casting a try and stuff. But there are like casters that are that make their living off of it, that are sort of working in Valorant, and like they actually just can't cast these games because they're being blocked out for like a caster competition. And at the end of the day, it's also like, well, I guess this is a great way to get casting without sort of paying for it. And you could also assume that this is like not nefarious behavior at all. But I just want to say that there is a reason now that in Valorant, for things like challenges, there are observer only streams without casting because they can't pay casters what casters should be paid. And I told them that you can't do this, so they've said, well, we can't afford these casters, so we're just going to do these observer only streams. Um, this wasn't happening at all before that, but I kicked up a lot of fuss about it because it was wrong, and these companies like they should sort of know better. And it was like very 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 uncomfortable for me to sort of see the way that they were, even though I wasn't even like locked into becoming a Valorant caster at all. I was doing a little bit here and there just to sort of see what it was like. But I would hear like constantly in my DMs people like, dude, like I've been offered like $20 an hour to sort of do this, and I'm like,
The buy
and
hour
they're
rate,
like,
by the way,
oh,
is the biggest joke in esports.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I don't deal with hourly rates, but I'm just like, okay. And then there is people that are like, oh, I'll do it for free. I don't care. Like, I come home from my job at X place, and now I'm just going to do this game. And then there's a caster X who's like, their living has been casting for a while, and that's how they make money. And they're all of a sudden like, I can't do this because the rates are being driven down by hobbyist casters that are coming in, and then or you get some casters that are like, oh, I had to take it for 250 or dollars a weekend or whatever because I need the work. I'm just getting started casting, and I have to go low or I don't get the job. I need the money, and I'm looking at them like, you should, if you're just starting out, you should be doing this as a hobby. In fairness, this shouldn't be like, you should never be saying I need this to take this amount lower than everyone else because I need to sort of make a living. Like, I encourage all casters to start out as a hobby, being mindful of the fact that there are people that do it as a full-time job, and like you want to try and get an understanding of what the rates are, because even if you are doing it as a hobby, if you're getting offered a job, you should be asking to get paid for it. And half the issue is that like people don't talk to each other that much. It's none of this is like published. There's no union for this stuff, and I don't. People always like just screaming at us to unionize because they're sick of seeing casters complaining about their conditions, but it's not that simple. Okay, if I start a union, um, I could definitely do that. It would be purely philanthropic move, because what's most likely in these situations when you create a union for anything, the highest earners make a lot less afterwards, right? In many cases, not in all cases, right? But it does benefit those that are not making nearly as much. So for someone who's like got one now a second mouth to feed, that's not like really attractive, and I don't really sort of from my perspective, like I appreciate that a lot of these casters are struggling, and I try and help them in my way. But I'm not going to go as far as to go and start a union when, for my money, like this industry is already about to head into two very difficult years, and I've got no interest in making it harder to provide for my family. I already have to live in California for this shit. Like, so hard enough as it is.
I love California, but yeah, it's kind of pricey out here. Kind of
Mm,
pricey.
it's ridiculous. It's actually ridiculous, man.
Yeah, taxes are absurd. Trust me, I'd live in Vegas if I could, but
It says
you know.
rent is also up like 20% as well in like
Yeah.
the last. It's been up like 10% a year pretty consistently. And it's like I don't know about you, Jack, but I'm not asking for like 10 to 20% raises every year. I haven't been able to do that. So it's like, and then
Well,
there's
I
inflation.
mean, like I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, inflation obviously, and we spoke about that before, obviously with the state of the economy right now and inflation being kind of crazy. Everybody's putting rent up everywhere. Very few commentators that I can name, at least from my own personal experience, my own friend group, have houses. I only know two, and one of them doesn't really commentate that much anymore. That have like a house and a mortgage.
One of them who has a house, but only because he sold an esports team, and they made a large amount of money off that sale of owning this team.
Yeah,
That they were able to get a house. Yeah, I don't know
it's
how
it's
realistic
tough.
that is.
Speaking of kind of communication there as well, I sometimes feel like there's no communication between tier one talents that are doing the job that you want to do. I'm speaking as like a tier three, tier two person right now,
Mm,
and between like a tier one talent and a tier two and three person. I feel like
yeah.
there's very little communication there, which surprises me a lot. In fact, I see a lot of people, and every now and then someone will come into my stream chat. I'm sure it's the same for you, where it's, oh, hey, like, I love your casting. Like, I'm getting into casting right now, yada, yada, yada. And I'm always like trying to reach out and like help people as much as possible. But it feels like there is this invisible barrier for whatever reason between the top end talent and like talent that are just getting started, and they
Mm.
don't want to reach out and like communicate with people that already kind of know their shit. And that is kind of what's causing this strange undercutting race to the bottom kind of thing.
Yeah.
Obviously we can't unionize, that's not really an option for our career, but I just wanted your thoughts on that, because I see this a lot and I'm surprised people don't reach out to the League of Legends people or like the Overwatch people or the Valorant people more. Well, I guess not Valorant because they technically haven't started yet, and like discuss these kind of things.
Yeah, there are. So we have to. I guess I have to speak from the perspective of someone wanting to come up in this sort of case. I think that there could be a bunch of reasons. One of them might be like they feel like they're already competing against those sort of top talents, so they don't maybe think that the talent would tell them anything. They don't feel like they would be able to access that information. Some might just be a little bit shy to do it, or don't want to feel like they're bothering someone. I think
Reasonable.
there's definitely like there's benevolent reasons for this. I will say that I know like 4 or 5 people that really frequently come to me and ask me um about their rates.
Yeah, which is good.
So for me, it's like if someone wants to know what I think is a reasonable rate, that's totally fine. But I sometimes get people that sort of take my offer, and I've offered this to people like to come talk to me and I can try and put you on the straight and narrow about rates and sort of what you should expect. Some people use that as like I don't cast at all. I didn't have any interest in casting until I found out you guys make money. So how much do you make? And I'm like, okay, you need to go away. Like, I'm not dealing with you. So if someone comes to me and it's like it's clear that they're trying to become a caster and they've got some work behind them and they're asking what they should think is reasonable. It's a different story. I get it a lot. I actually have. So I don't know if I've really seen. too many people complain about this sort of divide, because I do get a few people that do ask me a bunch of stuff, whether it's tier 2, tier 3 and below. Um, I had one guy that was like in a situation where he might have been undercutting and wanted to know about it, and I was able to sort of, say yes, that is what's happening here, or whatever. Um, so I don't know. People are, I guess, because I try to make it clear that people are okay to talk to me about it. But there's like a ton of reasons why. I think a lot of the time it's like I don't want to bother this person, or like I don't think that I will get anything out of it. But to reiterate, I'm pretty sure anyone could reach out to me or you, and
Yeah.
we'd be able to like give them an idea. Look, this is something that she's probably fine with me sort of saying this, and I'm okay saying it as well. But I work with I actually worked with Jen a fair bit when she was working on her negotiations with the Overwatch League at the end of last year, at the end of 2021. Um, we talked a lot about like, she was talking about what she was offered, and sort of the structure of the deal. And I sort of weighed in a lot on whether I thought it was fair or not. And that conversation didn't require me to reveal how much money I made. So don't be worried if, like if you're sort of afraid to ask because of how I'll interpret their request to help you with that stuff, because it doesn't usually need to happen.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so I definitely was able to do that for Jen, but there have been other casters that maybe haven't reached out and should. But guys like Rich Rad, good example, great caster from tier 2 at the moment. I talk with him pretty frequently. Um, I think he's, he obviously knows. I think he's sort of great, and we've talked a little bit about like how to work towards becoming a caster. A lot of the time I struggle to get back to people, so some people might have just found they need to poke me again to ask their question once more. But I don't think it's too bad, much of a thing.
Yeah.
I don't know what other scenes are like. But it's also like, to what degree have like the casters at the top made it clear that they're available to have these conversations? I don't think it's your responsibility to go around saying I'm willing to talk to people, but if it comes up, then say it. At the end of the day, if you're an up and comer, just bite the bullet and throw the DM out.
Yeah.
You may as well just shoot your shot. Don't be annoying about it, but some casters will be able to or willing to help you, and some won't for whatever reason. That's just
Yeah.
the way it
I
works.
mean, the reason why I bring that up is because, yeah, from what I've heard from other scenes and stuff too, it's like there's not really that communication there. Maybe there is obviously a lot more with Overwatch than it is, but it was more of a point, I suppose, to if you're out there and you do want help, like there are lots of people in various games that are willing to help. You just have to literally just throw the DM out. Like, I actually have a funny story about that. I DM'd Doa back in 2017 about my bachelor's degree, and Monty too, actually. My degree on computer games programming, but I did a dissertation on the difference between Korean and North American League of Legends teams in training practice and something else, discipline, I think. And I needed comment from commentators at the time, Monty and Doa being one of them. Didn't reply, but when Doa randomly DM'd me one time, he saw the history on the DM and he said something like, "Sorry, I didn't see it," or like some shit like that. It was from like years ago. I'm like, oh
So
my
funny.
god, that's
So
funny
funny.
as fuck I've ever seen. Funniest shit I've ever seen. But like, yeah, it's definitely something I just wanted to, from your mouth as well. Like, if there are people out there in any game, if anyone's listening to this from fucking League, like, people are
Yeah.
there to kind of help you out. It's not I don't feel like, and I've not met many casters that are very, like, especially at the top, opposed to helping casters that are maybe younger and
Yeah.
more inexperienced
I will
with
say
them.
that even at the top level, like, we casters don't always talk to each other that much either, like across different games, because
Also
we are
fair, yeah.
really siloed. Like, there is legitimately, I'm looking at it right now, there's a Discord that is full of casters. And it's like cast at the top level, and there's like the last message is from 2 years ago in this Discord. Right. So like good example. So I will like,
It's like the old Skype groups.
let's talk about like casters from other games. Like, I will
Sure.
talk with Van Silly frequently. He's a friend of mine. Guys like Intero from Siege. He's a guy that like I'll always chat to at an event. We're drinking my hand. We'll happily talk shop. Most of the Valorant people, like obviously like Lauren, we sort of infrequently we DM back and forth about whatever. So we if we're friends with them already, we do. But like I don't talk to anyone from Dota. I don't know anyone from Dota really, or StarCraft anymore. So like, you know if there was a situation where we needed to communicate, we probably could. But we're all so siloed in esports
Yeah.
that it can be very hard to like to bridge that divide, because we're all doing our own shit. We're all busy as heck, and we don't know what's going on in other games a lot of the time. It takes too much energy to become subject matter experts on one game, let alone all of them.
multiple. Yeah, it definitely takes a special kind of person to do that for sure. And it's actually, I guess this kind of leads into it. This is kind of a very open-ended question, but what would you say is your like pet peeve in like the esports industry or like casting? Would you say you've got one thing that kind of like kind of pisses you off just a little bit, apart from the race to the bottom?
Such an interesting question. About casting in general. Well, I just hate that there's no talent development pipelines in esports. It just doesn't seem like they're there. It just pisses me off. And then like these people who hire casters just decide on what casters to hire or hire back just arbitrarily, like based on what Twitch chat has said or God knows what. Like it's really hard for me to understand it. So I've struggled sometimes to see like top talent just not get gigs that they deserve because I'm secondhand insulted by that because I see the work they put in and identify very closely with that work they put in. And I see them not getting gigs, and then the people that maybe get put up instead of them or whatever. It's just very, very annoying. And these casters I know these casters are always going to these people for feedback, being like, hey, what can I do better? And they're always like, oh, it's good, it's fine. Like no one, they don't fucking know. Like there are not enough casting experts hiring or developing casters. It's not happening right now. Because honestly, the casters that stop casting go on and do something that actually can fucking support a family. They don't stay casters. They go and work on the back end or try and spin up a company or use the networking experience that they've developed to do something else. Like they don't stay because many casters realize that it's a bit of a halfway house. Like casting, when you might have this goal of like being a caster, but then when you realize like if you want to have like these things in life that like anyone with 30 plus has that has like a normal job, like
A house,
family, kids, holidays,
yeah.
Healthy boundaries between them and the internet or whatever. Like having that in casting is really hard. I can attest to this.
Yeah, I think, well, especially you in the situation now that you have one kid and one coming, like it's tough. Is there?
Bro, I love it, bro. I love watching childless casters out there banging on about how hard it is. Like, or it's like so a common thing. So a common thing for parents is sort of the reaction you see when people get a dog for the first
Sure.
time, right? And talk about how hard it is to look after the dog or how much work it is, or whatever. And it does take work. Like, don't get me wrong. But these people sat here with these kids, like, oh my god. And then what happens is that when you talk about your kid in conversation, like people obviously like want to when you converse with someone, you talk about common ground. But I always get like I talk about my kid, and then someone responds by talking about like analogy with their dog,
I
like
got my
something
fish,
their dog
bro. What do
did.
you mean? Like,
And I'm just like,
water
oh
change
god,
once a week.
so caring for a pet is a huge responsibility, and it's not that easy. But I always find that very funny. But I see a lot of casters out there like, I guess voicing maybe some of their struggles, and I'm sure some of these struggles are like really valid. But I suggest that many of these casters they might find their perspective shifts a lot when they have to keep up with the rest of the fucking industry when they have like a good half, if not more, of their day chewed up by parenting. Now, I'm not lamenting the fact. I think it's I will you never see me use the excuse of having a kid to explain my shortcomings as a commentator or my inability to progress in my career because it's like the least valid excuse I could probably find anyway. There's always time, but I will say the work is much harder to sort of stay at the top of your game. It's a high performance industry, and doing it with like a lot of your agency gets drastically reduced when you have kids. So your ability to sort of spend the time you need on improvement or VOD review, whatever it might be, like you really have to be much better with your time. And sometimes there just isn't the time in the day, and you have to accept that, or like you can't travel because family related stuff. So and esports isn't really built for dealing with that side of like their talent. I think having kids, which is fine. I don't think it has to. It's just I chose to be here, so it's whatever. But um, you know, I have found it really challenging to stay at the top of my game. Yeah, after having a kid, and then we'll see how we go at the second one. Like if I'm just dog shit this year, if I'm dog shit this year.
We know
it's
why.
not because I have a kid. It's because my time management outside of having a kid is not good enough. And I just
Lack of sleep. Hey, sometimes you cast better on lack of sleep and you're hungry. I know I do. I
I
don't know
mean,
why.
I don't know what I sounded like 2 years ago. Sort of after Griffin came around, I don't remember because I didn't sleep, and I
Yeah.
was like, I got dominated with postnatal depression as well. I don't know if that's the term used for the father. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
Uh, and like I don't even remember that. It was extremely hard. So yeah, if I was crap during that time, apologies. It was also middle of COVID Overwatch League, which was just kind
Oh,
of
that
shit
was
anyway. So
pretty sad. Pretty sad.
2021 Overwatch League, right? So
Yeah.
I apologize if I was kind of booty back then, but I'm shocked. I'm shocked that I'm still able to keep up. We'll see how long I can do it for though. No guarantees in this gig. That's for sure.
This okay. So this kind of before we lead on to the topic of like, I guess keeping up with the industry and keeping up with the job, I did want to kind of bring this up because this has been, I would say, not a public topic. Maybe every now and then, sure, but it's definitely been a private topic way before Overwatch came out, and I'm sure way before like League fucking came out and like casting like fucking it might have even happened like COD and shit like that. But coasting as a commentator when you reach the top, I think a lot of people in multiple over the years have been accused of coasting and accused of like not keeping at the top of the game. And I want to talk about this because you mentioned, it's hard. It is hard to keep yourself at the top because there are a lot of people that are coming in, younger people too, that are trying their fucking hardest and trying to get there through various means. And it's sometimes evident that maybe at the top some people do coast because for one reason or another, whether they kind of don't love the game anymore. And keeping on top of an esport game is much more difficult than a traditional sport game because our rules change every fucking 2 months.
Yeah.
Because the fucking meta changes, because this character's fucking broken. This other, Ari is fucking crazy in League of Legends. I don't know, Phoenix is OP in Valorant, you know what I mean? He has 7 flashes now, and now Junker Queen is OP because she antis everyone, you know what I mean? So I want to kind of get onto that topic really quickly because I think it's quite interesting because it happens a lot I would say in esports. Not a lot, but like the conversation does pop up a lot.
I think I've seen it before, with people I've worked with. Yeah. I never really well, did it upset me? I'm not sure because I guess it's a privilege. It's a position of privilege to say that I think that I've been able to progress based on the quality of my work. Like in that, like in my, this is a literal cisgender white guy telling you that. So like bear that in mind. But I have been able to perceive a meritocracy through my rise alongside some good luck, I would say, and some networking. Like I feel like I've been able to, to advance because on the merits of my work. There are many people of different genders, backgrounds that just might not be able to say the same thing. So like that, let's just establish that first. When I've seen people that I thought coasting, I was just like, that's great. Like they're gonna get, I'm gonna catch up to them so fast they are not gonna know what hit them. Like I'm gonna come and they are just gonna all of a sudden be like, holy crap, like I cannot keep up. So, um, I so I will say no names here. That label has been used to describe people at the Overwatch League this year, and I personally was gravely offended by the use of that verbiage. Um, and my understanding is that was probably leveraged at me and Matt. That's just a guess. Really, it is only just a guess. I think people can misconstrue um, someone in tenure for sort of being for coasting. I guess a good example is like I'm keenly aware that I've casted every grand final of the Overwatch League so far.
Oh, don't worry, I'm
Uh,
aware as well.
yeah. So that's great. That's 5 years of me being able to secure. Um, I wouldn't say top billing because in 2018 I cast the first best of 7 in the grand finals, not the last
Yep.
one. That was Monty and Doa. At the time, I was like, okay, I would have liked to have done the final, but I understand that these guys. I also felt like those guys were not as strong as me and Matt were, and it would be a matter of time. Like it would just happen. It did happen, but that might not be because they were objectively not as strong. That was just the how I sort of perceived the situation. Um, I think that some casters do coast for sure. And one of the biggest reasons is they're not passionate about it anymore, because what happens with a lot of casters, they come into casting with the dreams to become a caster, and then they realize that that like is all well and good, but the sheen is not there. Like, it never is what you think it will be, because as soon as you get to that point, you're now starting to deal with complex industry politics, economic situation, the fact that we're somehow getting people trying to pay us less year after year than sort of more, and there's like a lot of, yeah, and there's like the threat of layoffs, and there's sort of having to appease the right kind of people, maybe realizing that the skill set that got you into that position might not be the one that's going to be able to keep you there. Or or you're just not as passionate about the game you're on anymore. I think if you're not passionate about the game you're on anymore, you should definitely look for a way out as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe some people just don't always know how to find that. Um, or maybe they think that like maybe those people that coast what they value about it is the money, which means that they will never be a good caster ever again, I think, or they'll just slowly sort of start to fall off, because if you're not doing it for like the love of it, then like you won't be able to keep up with the people that are. Like, it just doesn't matter. You just won't be able to do it. You'll just lose. Even if you're super talented. Um so like I'm sure it happened back in the day when there was less competition, for sure.
Yes.
For sure. Like 5, 6 years ago, yeah, people absolutely did that, because frankly, there was just no one else. No one else could actually compete with them on like a baseline level of like technical skill. So it didn't really matter if their passion wasn't there. They were able to just like soullessly continue to do the thing. But it would still show it in their product, I think. But then there's like some castles who aren't coasting that might look like they are, because they've just been like at the top for so long, and people think they're just, but yeah, look, I think anyone that knows I think anyone that knows me is like knows I'm pretty interested in professional development and like trying to improve, and like maybe they don't realize that I'm watching them very closely, and looking at things that they do, and trying to like I've been public. I stole a ton of stuff from Sideshow, or just like adapted a bunch of his ideas and approaches.
Yeah.
And I was like really glad. There are a lot of people that I'm really glad to work with in that way, because there are things that they do that I'm like, oh, I should try that as well. It's like it provides me inspiration for my own improvement. People. So Matt is an interesting example, because people might have interpreted his sort of demeanor as being one that's coasting. I think Matt's pretty clear about the fact that like casting is not the end goal for him. Um, but he's hyper competitive, so still being the best is very important to him. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, like he might like to find himself in like a game dev position. But people treat his like very relaxed demeanor as someone who is sort of being lazy, which is part of his. It's actually a strategy
That's
that he
him.
uses to
That's
get
his
people to
brand.
yeah, he uses that to get people to underestimate him as
Yeah.
well, because that sort of works for him. So, yeah, I mean, I would challenge anybody who sort of thinks that I'm coasting to, because it might seem that like my level has stayed like maybe consistent over the last couple of years, and maybe hasn't gone up a ton, but it actually has. But because I've got like the extra like family stuff going on and a lot less time, it just looks the same. But I mean, the effort I'm having to put in has increased. So I guess I'm having to put in more effort each year to maintain this sort of level, even if it's not necessarily going up. You also do get to a point in your casting where your improvements you make are smaller increments, I think, and they're in more subtle ways, because once you have the technique down and you've got a personality that people gravitate towards, then it's like a lot of small tweaks and like little things that most people don't even notice. So they might just think that you're staying the same or whatever, but in reality, someone who is trained to look at casters and sort of see what they do might see something different. I would just offer that as an example. Not everyone coasts, but some people do. I think it happens less and less now, though, because, well, unless you own equity in the company you're casting for, maybe it doesn't matter, right? I'm sure there are people that have maybe just fucked around and mailed it in for a bunch of time, but they're not casters that I have any respect for anyway. So they probably know who they are anyway, based on that description. So um, it happens, but not as much as people think. And I think that people project. Casters that are frustrated with their inability to advance will project their inability to do so on things that are out of their control, on things like people coasting and people camping and people squatting in the top spots, so they don't have to reflect upon their own shortcomings that lead to them being in a position where they're frustrated enough to accuse casters of coasting. I think that's as diplomatically as I can phrase this.
No, that was very diplomatic. Extremely. You could have been at the UN. It was that diplomatic. I do
Yeah.
want to quickly add a small piece in there too about taking inspiration, I guess, from your peers is definitely something I want to just add on top of what you said with Josh. Like when I did color casting in 2021, he was someone I looked to, and I still think he's one of the best storytellers and narrative builders in the industry that we have right now. And I did take a lot of inspiration from him, like moving into color commentary. And I think in general, if you are at the top of your game or like the top, tier one or whatever, it's very easy, I think, to look at your peers and say, yeah, they do a lot of things right that I do wrong, or like maybe I can improve. And I think that's quite something that's quite important to look to as well. Let's talk about, I guess, where kind of Matt is like pushing towards, or like, you mentioned his end goal isn't really to kind of cast forever. Or that's what it kind of appears,
Yeah.
right?
I think he's okay with me saying that publicly. Yeah. I don't
Yeah,
think he's.
it's something that I think a lot of casters kind of think about is, where am I going to be in? To be fair, this is a thing we think about every fucking off season as well. Where the fuck am I going to be next year? Do I have a job, a house, food, maybe rent? I don't know, not sure yet.
Do I have residence in this country?
Yeah, exactly? Especially for like me, you, Scott. Well, I guess not Scott anymore. I guess not you sometime anymore. I don't know.
I'm working on the green
Working
card
on
right
that,
now.
yeah. But like, yeah, exactly as well. For me, I'm not married or anything, so it's like, well, do I have residency still? Oh shit, like maybe
Like,
I don't.
what
We'll
point?
see.
What point, Jack? Do you own enough fish where you can be legally considered an aquarium, and
Oh,
then
true.
be actually like able to
I
stay
get
in the
tax
United
write-off.
States based on that? Yeah, exactly.
That'd be kind of sick.
Yeah,
I'd
think
be down
about
for
it.
that, honestly.
Mm.
But like that's kind of a worry, and it's very easy, I think, for a lot of casters to look at full-time positions within companies that they're working at, or a different company, maybe a team, maybe an esports team. Not the best example right now with 100 Thieves laying off 30 people, but like more brick and mortar companies, S&P 500 companies like Blizzard, Riot, etc. Is that something that you've kind of thought about in recent times, moving into a company role, or is it something that you want to just put off for as long as possible?
So, the state of the industry for casters is such that I would strongly recommend casters consider what comes after casting, because it is not. I don't think that any sane human wants to live on 1 year contracts in very volatile economic and just I just general very quickly shifting conditions in the esports industry for very long. Um, Easy to say that now because I think we're in a position where there's some economic downturn that's definitely affecting the esports industry, but it is not. I don't think it's a good idea to not have a plan B. My issue is that all I ever wanted to do was cast. So now I have to think of, okay, well, yeah, maybe I have to do something else, or I need a plan to do something else, but I actually don't want to do anything else than what I'm doing right now. But the reality is that what I'm doing right now may not be something that can support my family in the long term. So maybe I just have to go and be like most people and go and do something that I don't want to do. I mean, casting is not, it's it's not an, I don't think it's an end goal for anyone in this industry, because you are, yeah, again, there's no guarantees. There's just no guarantees for you. Guarantees as casters are almost impossible to build into your contracts as it is. Um, and you can get fired for a whole host of different reasons. When you're a public facing person, you usually have contract clauses for things like making your company look bad. If you comment on the business practices of the company that you represent, or if you're accused of misdemeanor that you may not have, you might not be guilty of that at all. It doesn't matter. You will still be terminated on the spot. There won't actually be a discussion. You'll just not have a job. Um, Now, I want to make it very clear that in the situation where people are accused of some of the more egregious things, we find that there's obviously credible. These allegations are credible. But even if the allegation is not credible, there's a good chance you will still lose your job as well. So, um, not great for someone who wants to have a calm, smooth mental going into their later years. I don't know what I'm gonna do, man. I mean, I guess it's self-serving for me to say that like the industry doesn't have enough talent development, because that's something I could do. But that I also don't know if I want to do that. I just want to cast. I just want to fucking cast. But also, you have to accept that like maybe at some point people don't want some crusty old 40 something talking about the video game. So people want to uh, they want to engage with the person. They want to relate to the person on screen. It's also the reason why our broadcast teams are slowly becoming less full of the same white guys with brown hair. Um, you know, and maybe yeah, maybe there's not a place for like an older bloke, there as time goes on. So I consider that everyone has a shelf life. I think as a public figure, you can go and be a public figure in some other way, but you have to understand that maybe casting is not going to be it for the long term. So I think it's very wise to have goals, and I think that people who are happy casting and just loving life, I don't want to pop the bubble. I don't want to ruin their moment running through the meadow, through the wheat sheaves, and their hands are brushing through them, and it's like Valhalla on Earth. You definitely need to think about what's next, even if you just got here. In fact, the sooner the better.
If there's one, this will be my final question, I guess. If there's one thing that you'd want to go into, you said maybe not even talent development. What would it be? Would it be in a games company? Would it be something else? It's very open ended, but
Yeah, I think that. So I enjoy project work. Is what I did as an engineer
okay.
in my sort of project management capacity. So I think there's a lot of ways in which like the game development can appeal to me there. I'd never want to be a community manager. I don't want to deal with any of you. I would never want to be the person that has to read the replies to my tweets. Like that is just absolutely ridiculous. I care a lot about esports and the stories that we tell. I think that's still something I want to be a part of. But there's always a sense of like, how old do I need to get where I can survive the ego death of having to be in a production truck while someone else is experiencing that moment sort of firsthand out there. I think it'll be tough, but it's going to be a big part of actually aging gracefully for me. So hopefully I can still be a part of like creating some special moments in esports and telling people stories, even if not sort of being the one that is telling them. So um, that is going to depend a lot on whether this esports industry thing is going to make sense in the longer term. It might just not. I also do like I enjoy like starting to work more in like a lifestyle content direction as well, or at least like the intersection of a gaming and lifestyle content. So I've really enjoyed working on shows for like Twitch where we're getting a lot of these influencers away from the PCs, where they're like doing the power live meets I do with Tyler One, or like the ultimate challenge with a lot of these sort of obstacles. So because my skill set is pretty transferable as a host and caster, and obviously we all do lifestyle things even if we don't realize it. So that intersection is something I'm interested in. So I'm always looking at like ways to branch out a little bit, while still maintaining my roots in gaming and esports.
No, I think it's a pretty good answer. I think our skill set in general of being on camera talent does translate to a variety of industries, which is we're just trapped in this small. Well, not trapped, but we want to be here in this little esports bubble that we're currently in, hoping it doesn't explode and we lose our jobs tomorrow. Yeah, I would just give you the floor now if there's anything you want to kind of say or shout out or whatever, and yeah, we'll wrap this up.
No, yeah. I mean, obviously you can follow me over Twitter at UberShouts. I think I'm like Mitch the Uber on Instagram, but it's whatever. I can't even sort out my own nickname, let alone the way my accounts are handled. And yeah, don't know where I'll be. If I'm at the Overwatch next year, Overwatch League next year rather, y'all should come watch. Otherwise, who knows what we'll be doing? Some other game somewhere else. But yeah, follow me on Twitter, and I'm sure I'll be able to keep you updated about what the fuck I'm doing.
There you go. Thank you very much, Mitch, and yeah, we'll see you soon.